Hey, it's Brock here with Rock Hill Farms, and hopefully today I'm going to cut hay on my own property for the first time. Now, this is an old hay baler that was drug out of the weeds and needed a lot of work. I think we've about got it ready to go, but there's a couple little things I still need to do before putting it to use. Now, my experience baling hay is pretty limited. I've helped with it and just recently done it a couple times, but this is all going to be a learning process for me. So if you see me making any mistakes, be sure to tell me about it. I'm not going to take it as criticism as long as you do it in a respectful way. So let me show you where we're at with this hay cutter, what it needs, and see if we can get it fixed up. So this would be what they call a disc mower. Now, I've gotten different definitions from different people about the difference between a disc mower and a drum mower, but I think this would be a disc mower. Anyway, what cuts the hay is these little blades right here. You got 4 cutting heads, and then basically this tray here rides on the ground. It's operated hydraulically off of this cylinder, and then you want it to kind of float on the ground. You know, you've got this spring here to give it a little bit of float. You kind of want it tilted just slightly forward so that if you hit a rock or something, it doesn't dig in and tear something up. One thing we have to do is there's a curtain that goes around that, and that needs put on. I've got the pieces and it's kind of in rough shape, but I might have to get some bolts for it. Next thing is to get this leveled out, and I've already tested the hydraulics. It moves up and down the way it should. Whenever I put the end of it down, we're pretty close to leveled how we need to be, but I feel like we have too much exposed thread here on the top link. I think we're almost to the end of the adjustment, and if you go too far, you take all the strength out of this and it can rip out and ruin your top link, and who knows what might happen when you lose connection to your implement while you're running. The next thing is, I think this PTO shaft looks to me like it's too long. We only have about 8 inches in between the connection point and the end of this shaft. Now, I was given permission, this isn't my cutter, but I was told if I need to cut it down to make it work, just cut it down. But I hate to cut somebody else's shaft if they need it longer for their equipment. So I'm gonna look around and see if I have another PTO shaft on the property that will fit on that shaft and is already shorter. Not even hot. I love this saw. I only removed 1 inch. I don't think it needed very much. So I have resolution on a couple of these items. First, I was correct about the drive shaft. I couldn't get it put in, and if you can't fit it in there, collapse it far enough that it clears and then expand it back out. You might be too short. That's one way to find out. So I took 1 inch off. I actually recorded taking 1 inch off, and I decided that wasn't quite enough, so I took another inch off. I took 2 inches off the other shaft. Drive shaft is fine. With the top link, I unscrewed this about 2 more turns, lengthening it. Then I went back in those 2 turns, so I know I have at least 2 turns because it hadn't popped out yet. The reason I'm still using this, I went to 2 different farm supply stores near me, and both sold top links, and neither one of them had a longer top link than this one. So this is gonna have to work. Now let's take a look at this end where I'm missing parts. I've got these top bars put on. I'm not sure if I got them exactly right, but they're on there. And the curtain that's supposed to go around this, its primary purpose is to keep you from accidentally throwing a rock up into your cab or hitting you in the back of the head. I think it also prevents it from throwing the grass too far, but I don't think that's the big part of it. I think it's to keep it from throwing things. It's a safety measure. Well, the curtain that went around this one was full of holes and it had a rip in it, and I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to use it, and then I went off and left it, so I don't even have it. And I'm gonna try using this blue tarp. I went and got a $12 tarp and we'll see. Basically with the tarp, I'm just gonna get this evenly spaced. Actually, I'm gonna focus more on making sure I have enough overhang in the front. And then I'm just gonna poke some holes around here and zip tie it to the pipe. I borrowed this from Jake from the tractor yard, and I sent him a message, said, hey, you know, I don't have that tarp, and the one that we did have, that curtain for it, is messed up. He said, well, just get you a small tarp, put over it, and zip tie it at the top. Problem with this tarp is it's soft and flimsy, and so if I hang it down far enough, and the job of this is to keep it from throwing a rock into the cab, if I hang it down far enough, I thought I did that. I thought, well, I got it. It's hung down here. It's going to work perfect. Then just a little light breeze came through and it pushed it up, and this was riding against the blades. All that's going to do is chop it up and get fibers wrapped around, and you don't want this to be able to reach the blades. So I had to tighten it up a little more, and now it feels like it'll push back and it'll just let things fling out anyway. So I gave it a try. I did the best I could. If this was my rake and I was keeping it, I think I'd find the manufacturer or take some measurements and order me a curtain that actually fits it and works for it. But right now, I just want to cut the hay. I'm behind schedule. I should have already got it done. So I'm just going to go out there and see how this thing works. And I guess if I bust a cab window, it's an expensive mistake. But the other thing is, I'm not on some random property. This is my property, and I know there's nothing out there. It's been a hayfield for a long time, and it's not hilly. It's nice, perfect, smooth ground, so we shouldn't have any problem. We have a 40-acre property here. Actually, I only own 20 of the 40, but I'm baling all 40. I'd say this patch right here is 10 to 15 acres. Not sure exactly, but it's a good sized chunk that runs all the way across the front of the 40. I'm gonna start with that. I think the bigger the squares you make, as long as they're not too unusually shaped, then the more efficient you'll be when you go to make the bales. Now there's a fence line that runs across here that separates the farmable ground from the rocky ground, so we're not going to cross that. So as a novice at this, my understanding is you want to make the first two circles with the rake sticking out towards the fence line or the obstruction or whatever the boundary is, and that will keep the tractor away from tree limbs or hitting anything. Then after you make those first two loops, you want to turn around and go the other way. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, now keep in mind, I've never done this. I'm sitting here going, man, that doesn't look like it's cut. What's going on? What's wrong? Let's look at it. I scoop all this up. All that's loose. What's under it? Yeah, that's pretty well cut. That's gonna work. Okay, so we're cutting decently well, but I've got a problem. Whenever I let the mower down as far as I think it should go, I feel like it should be kind of skidding on this plate here. That's the way the other mower I used worked. And for this to be down that low, where all three sets of blades are down low like that, it gets me in an angle right here where this PTO holder is rubbing the PTO shaft. And as I stand here and talk about it, I'm noticing I'm not centered. So I might be able to lift this thing up, pull the pins out, and shove it over that way and help. The only other choices are to bend this over a little bit or to run it with this end of this not being down as far. Let me see if I can shift it. I don't know if you guys could see me shifting that, but by just centering this up, this is just Brock not noticing that it was off center at first. By centering that up, I'm able to come down, and we're next to that now. When I lifted that up, it came at an extreme angle, which tells me it has to have a lot of down pressure on this end and absorb some of that into that spring to level itself out. So there's no possibility that you just run this higher up, which is what I had considered maybe my issue was. If you're wondering why I stayed about 6 feet away from the fence on that spot right there, it's because there's a chunk of wood, actually it's a tree branch that I didn't want to hit, and I was just going around it. And after that, I still didn't do a great job of keeping an even distance from the fence, or making sure that I didn't leave any stragglers, and that I was getting the full cut width out of the mower. All of this stuff is things you have to get a little bit of practice at. This is my first time ever using a hay cutter like this. I did find it to be a lot easier once I'd made those first few passes and I turned the mower around, or turned the tractor around with the mower on the other side. It was a lot easier to keep my spacing at that point. Now that I'm turned around and going the other direction, all I had to do was get the hang of keeping my front tires out of the uncut grass. And if I stayed over about 10 inches from there, I would cut everything and make the most out of the width of the cutter that I had available. One thing I've learned over time is tractors are going to overheat when you're cutting brush. There's all that dust in the air, it's going to suck up and stick to your radiator. But you don't want to shut them off. My instinct was shut it off so it'll cool off. That's not how it works. Then your fluid is sitting still trying to cool off. You keep it circulating, it cools off faster. When the buzzer went off, it was reading 110 degrees Celsius, and I need to figure out how to switch that to Fahrenheit so I know what the number means. But in the time it took me to go get my leaf blower, it dropped to 88 just by sitting there with the hood open. So now I need to slide out the little screen and blow off everything I can see from here. So now I'm not having any problems with the mower, and I know what to do when it overheats. Everything's cutting smooth, and I'm able to keep myself tracking in straight lines. The only problem I still had was figuring out how to handle the corners.
And I think that's the age-old problem that there isn't a perfect answer to. But what I was doing was trying to make the corners as often as I could, but every so often I'd just cut them and round them off a little bit and leave a little triangle of uncut grass. And if you do that, you really need to go back and catch that uncut grass later. But I figure you can leave those corners every so often and then mow an X across the field when you're done. Now, if you have a better solution for how to make square corners with a tractor that doesn't turn square, let me know what it is.
Guys, there's a couple strips left right in the center, and then a few spots on the corner I need to fix. And if you hear a bunch of noise, that's not lightning, it's July 3rd, so people are shooting off fireworks. And I was determined though, I was gonna finish this last little bit, just use the tractor lights, it would be fine. And then I looked down and my fuel light was flashing on and off on the last bar. I said, I better shut this thing down before I run it out of fuel and give myself a problem. So this is a 15-acre patch, I would guess, and I'd say I did 95% of it tonight. Good first day for baling hay here on Rock Hill Farm. I appreciate you taking time to watch the video. I'll put links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.